This is Nightly Business Report with Sue Herrera and Bill Griffin.
Open house. Home sales falter for a second straight month, even though the spring selling season is turning into a buyer's market. Cleared for takeoff, NASA is working on an air traffic control system for the future of delivery by drone. Eye of the storm. Homeowners want to protect their houses against hurricanes, and it may not be as costly as you think. Those stories and more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Tuesday, May 21st. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Bill is on assignment tonight. The stocks that led the market higher today were the same ones that led it lower yesterday. The tech sector rebounded after the Commerce Department eased restrictions against China's telecom giant Huawei. The reprieve from trade penalties helped ease tensions between the U.S. and China, and investors seized on that positive news. The Dow Jones Industrial Average advanced 197 points to 25,877. The Nasdaq was up 83, and the S&P 500 added 24. As one strategist put it, the easing of restrictions on Huawei is a ray of hope that the worst-case scenario will be avoided. Eunice Yoon has reaction from Beijing.
The U.S. Commerce Department is ordering a 90-day reprieve for Huawei after it put the Chinese company on an export blacklist that could threaten Huawei's survival. The move allows Huawei to maintain its current networks and software updates, including Google's. Google had suspended some of its business with Huawei, but Huawei's founder told state media today that his company is in talks with the U.S. tech giant on how to deal with the ban. In an unusual move, Ren Zhengfei sat with a group of Chinese journalists on state TV, saying that his team was already prepared for any disruption to their supply chain, so the U.S. reprieve didn't mean much. Ren said in times of peace, the company sources half of its chips from the United States, but that it could also make its own. He added that the U.S. underestimates Huawei's strength and that a clash over technology is inevitable, though he warned that it should not fan nationalist sentiment. Anti-American rhetoric, though, continues to rise in China. The state broadcaster has now aired 6 anti-U.S. films in a row. A TV show about a Chinese family that moved to Los Angeles was yanked from programming, and the Game of Thrones finale still hasn't aired here. At first, Tencent, the company airing the show, said that there was a transmission problem, but then HBO blamed the trade dispute, and so do many Chinese. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Eunice Yoon in Beijing.
A Federal Reserve official today said the trade war is a big risk for the economy. Boston Fed President Eric Rosengren noted that the tariffs could increase pressure on the overall economy, and there's a chance it could take some time to be resolved. For that reason, he says policymakers should remain patient until the uncertainty between the world's 2 largest economies resolves itself. And one prominent manufacturer of baby products is hoping the trade war between the U.S. and China is short-lived because his business depends on it. Elon Mui is in Piscataway, New Jersey.
Think about everything that goes into a baby registry. A crib, a stroller, a high chair, maybe even a baby walker. There's a good chance those products are made by Delta Children, the country's largest manufacturer of baby furniture and gear. Right now, it's in a trade tug of war.
In my showroom here, everything that I sell can be affected, and it is beyond a huge issue.
Nearly all of its products are made in China and shipped to the U.S., to warehouses like this one. These gliders just arrived and are being packed into a container for delivery to Amazon or even straight to the consumer. Delta has contracts with major retailers, from Walmart to Pottery Barn. 90% of the cribs at Target come from Delta.
When President Trump rattled the industry with 10% tariffs on cribs and baby furniture, Delta absorbed most of that cost, raising prices just 3 to 4%. But now those tariffs are going up to 25%. And if President Trump makes good on his threats, the rest of their products could get hit too.
Moving the production out of China is not that easy because the safety involved in it. We have a whole infrastructure of individuals, of test facilities set up in China, making sure that these cribs are safe for not just for the first child that's in it, but for the second and the third child.
That means tough choices for everyone. Delta has to raise prices. Retailers are canceling orders. And parents have to decide, is it worth it?
I don't know how a mom living on $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year is going to afford it.
Delta says America needs a timeout from the trade war. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Ilan Mui in Piscataway, New Jersey.
And now to housing, which is in the middle of its key spring selling season. Today, we learned that sales of existing homes, the bulk of properties on the market, fell in April, declining for the second straight month. Now, this comes despite a pullback in mortgage rates, as well as an increase in the supply of homes for sale, which had been a major headache for that industry. Diana Olek has more.
This was built in the 70s.
There were plenty of shoppers out looking for homes this spring, but apparently not too many buyers, at least not as many as last year. Home sales in April fell more than 4% compared with the year ago, even though the supply of homes for sale was slightly higher. The expectation was that lower mortgage rates would help. The average rate on the 30-year fixed really plummeted in March when buyers would have signed the contracts for those April closings.
The fundamentals for higher home sales are improving, certainly job creation, low interest rates, and also additional inventory coming onto the market, more choices for consumers. But it takes a little time for the consumers to actually sign contracts and close the deals.
Prices are still rising, but the gains are shrinking. In the Northeast, prices were barely up 1% annually. Still, realtors say today's sellers have to get more realistic on pricing if they want to move their homes quickly.
On the upper end market, sellers need to be very cautious about how they price their home, otherwise they will not attract buyers.
Sales continue to be weakest at both the very low and very high ends of the market, but for very different reasons. At the low end, it's because there's precious little for sale. At the high end, it's because there's a glut, and prices need to reflect that. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Diana Olek.
Home Depot is often seen as a barometer for the housing market because if people feel good about their finances, they often spend on their homes, which is why today's results from the home improvement retailer sent some mixed messages. Earnings and revenue were both better than expected, but its outlook was disappointing. Courtney Reagan digs into Home Depot's results.
Home Depot's first quarter came up short, due largely to a wet and cold start to spring and a sharp drop in the price of lumber. February was the second wettest on record in the U.S., and that kept shoppers home. Spring is a critical selling season for home improvement retailers. It's why they hold Spring Black Friday events. But if it's cold and rainy, consumers aren't doing outdoor home improvement projects or shopping for garden supplies.
Now, there's a lot of data my team and I watch. As weather is turning more spring-like in markets across the country, sales in this category are picking up. So I suspect that with Home Depot, that's going to imply a pretty strong second quarter.
Home Depot executives said big ticket items, those that are $1,000 or more, are coming back as the weather improves. Professionals like contractors and plumbers do a lot of big ticket buying, and the retailer said the pros have a backlog of business to catch up on. But even if the weather turns, the other big wild card for Home Depot is the price of lumber, which has fallen dramatically over the past year. During the quarter, Home Depot sold more lumber, but at half the price of last year. And according to CFO Carol Tomei, that could turn into an $800 million hit for the full year. Tomei told me because lumber is a project starter, it's the first item a consumer will buy. So when the price of lumber fluctuates, it can have a meaningful impact on other parts of the business. The good news for investors is that Home Depot still sees a healthy housing environment. And while higher tariffs aren't incorporated into guidance, the company has a plan to manage it with low impact to shoppers or shareholders. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Courtney Reagan.
Joining us now to talk more about the health of the housing market is Odetta Cushy. She is the Deputy Chief Economist at First American Financial. Welcome. Nice to have you with us.
Great to be here.
Now, the market did soften a little bit in April and the month before, but you see a silver lining. You see things improving. Why?
Absolutely. Our outlook for 2019 is largely the same despite softening April numbers. We're seeing the market purchasing power really benefiting from affordability tailwinds from low mortgage rates and a strengthening labor market with no signs of slowing down. And on top of that, you have slower house price appreciation, which is helping on the affordability side. You also track something called tenure length, which is the amount of time that a homeowner spends in the home. And it reached 11 years, a 9% increase compared with a year ago. Why is that? Is that a fundamental shift? So what we see is before the recession, average tenure was approximately 5 years. But as homeowners were locking into 3.5% mortgages, they're really feeling rate locked in, despite the fact that mortgages are flirting with about 4%. So as mortgage rates continue to decline, we should see some loosening of that rate lock-in effect and having that tenure start to decline a little bit.
Well, as one who had her first mortgage at 16% way back when, 3 and 4% sounds pretty good. What about the trade situation that's going on right now? Could that have a dampening effect on demand?
Absolutely. So the trade effect, there could be two sides to it. Obviously, it could have the impact on mortgage rates, declining mortgage rates, which could be a positive for the housing market. But on the flip side of that, there's the implication that about a 25% tariff would hit the construction industry by about $2.5 billion in taxes. So obviously another headwind to the construction industry.
Now, we did hear in the past 2 months that the elimination of state and local tax deductions in some of the high tax states really dampened sales. Has that evened out at all?
So we haven't really seen the impact of the tax change on the national scale nor the state scale. In fact, you have to get down to, very specific micro geographies, really high cost markets to even see any impact on sales and home prices.
Well, that's a little bit of good news. If mortgage rates decline a little bit further, might that juice the home market a little bit more and also maybe get people to list those houses at more reasonable prices?
Absolutely. That's what we're waiting for. If mortgage rates continue to fall, it'll push those existing homeowners to move up into another home, and it'll also really prop affordability for that first-time home buyer.
Odetta, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Odetta Cushy with First American Financial. It is time to take a look at some of today's upgrades and downgrades. Kroger was upgraded to outperform from market perform at Bernstein. The analyst points to the retailer's short and long-term strategy. The price target is $33. The stock rose about 1% to $24.30. TripAdvisor was upgraded to buy from hold at Needham. The analyst cites the company's return to modest user growth in the fourth quarter. The price target is $63. The stock rose more than 1.5% to $45.74. A different kind of call on Tesla. Morgan Stanley cut its bear case valuation of that stock to $10 from $97. The analyst cites Tesla's debt load, exposure to China, and uncertainty around the company more generally. His base case price target, though, is $230. Shares fell a fraction to $205.08. Still ahead, drone delivery is put to the test.
I'm Jane Wells in Reno, Nevada. Drone deliveries to your home in an urban area? What better place than the biggest little city in the world to test it out? We'll have that coming up.
A New York jury says Johnson & Johnson must pay $25 million to a woman who claims she got cancer by using some of the company's products. The woman alleges that her cancer was linked to products that contain talc. The $25 million is for compensatory damages. The jury will meet next week to consider punitive damages. J&J says that there were legal errors at trial and that it's confident there will be a reversal on appeal. The Postal Service is testing its first long-haul self-driving delivery truck. The 2-week pilot program will move mail between distribution centers in Phoenix and Dallas. A safety engineer and a driver in the cab will monitor its performance and take control if there are issues. The Postal Service says it hopes the new technology can increase efficiency and also savings. And from driverless trucks to drones, many see a time when the unmanned vehicles would deliver goods, conduct search and rescue, and even carry commuters. But first, a nationwide system is needed where they can operate safely. And NASA is trying to put one together. Jane Wells is in Reno tonight.
Clear for takeoff. If the future of drones is delivering goods or people, most of that will be done beyond a drone pilot's line of sight. So NASA is figuring out an air traffic system to keep potentially hundreds of thousands of commercial drones safe from each other and from you.
We're testing out all the various technologies that really hasn't been tested out before, from collision avoidance, obstacle avoidance, remote identification, and Jane, we're doing this under beyond visual line of sight conditions.
For testing, NASA has chosen Reno, Nevada, the biggest little city in the world.
We're predominantly gaming city, and we think technology and infrastructure and drone policy to be at the forefront is really pretty incredible.
The city of Reno is so committed to this project, it's actually shutting down roads downtown in the middle of the week so the test can be conducted.
Challenges include what to do if communications are lost or if it gets too windy. Battery power is a huge issue, but there's also a challenge on the ground.
The biggest challenge ends up being really socialization and understanding public acceptance of the technology.
Privacy is an issue, and locals are curious.
In today's world, you always have to be concerned.
I can see them flying out, like right there when I'm enjoying a glass of wine after work on my deck. So that's a little bit weird, but I'm not worried about anything else like that.
NASA's traffic control system was developed at its Ames research lab in Silicon Valley. And with many more drones than airplanes predicted, a different system is needed. Instead of a human controller giving a drone clearance, NASA has created a peer-to-peer awareness system, telling a drone, in essence, not where it can be, but where it cannot.
Instead of saying that this is what you are authorized to do, he says this is what you shouldn't do. Everything else you can operate by yourself. So we changed the paradigm.
Goldman Sachs estimates the business of managing drone traffic will be worth nearly $1 billion by 2025. Companies like Amazon and Google are working with NASA. And later this summer, NASA will hand over its final decisions to the FAA, which will create rules of the road for a highway a few hundred feet overhead. For Nightly Business Report, Jane Wells, Reno, Nevada.
Sales at Kohl's got crunched, and that's where we begin tonight's market focus. The retailer missed Wall Street earnings estimates and also cut its full-year profit forecast. The company blamed promotions and a rise in shipping costs and said it hopes its nationwide rollout of Amazon returns will help boost sales. Shares tumbled today more than 12% to $55.15. J.C. Penney reported a bigger sales decline and a wider than expected loss in the most recent quarter. The CEO says the retailer has made solid progress, but that there's no silver bullet and the company's turnaround will take time. The small cap stock dropped nearly 7% to $1.07. But it was a different story at TJX Companies, which posted better than expected earnings and boosted its full-year profit forecast. The parent company of TJ Maxx, Marshalls, and Home Goods saw solid same-store sales and an increase in customer traffic. The stock was up a fraction to finish at $53.26. Late today, Nordstrom reported sales that were weaker than expected, and it cut its full-year forecast. The retailer blamed softer trends and execution issues related to its loyalty program. That sent the stock lower in initial after-hours trading after rising 1% in the regular session. AutoZone topped Wall Street's earnings and revenue estimates. The CEO says industry fundamentals remain strong and the company's market share is improving. The stock revved higher more than 5.5% to finish at $1,032.25. PPG Industries says it will not split up and that keeping the company intact is the best strategy. This despite pressure from an activist investor who said a split would accelerate sales and profit growth. The stock was up more than 1% to $109 even. And Merck will buy the cancer drug maker Peloton Therapeutics for $1 billion. The acquisition comes as Peloton was preparing to go public. This deal helps Merck bolster its portfolio of cancer treatments. Shares of the Dow component rose a fraction to $79.50. Well, if you are planning to fly this summer, get ready for a lot of company. An industry trade group expects this to be a record travel season, and it comes despite the grounding of Boeing's 737 MAX planes. Phil LeBeau joins us from Chicago. Good to see you as always, Phil. The airports are going to be crowded. How many people are we talking about here?
An estimated 257 million people. Now, that's between June 1st and the end of August. Basically, you're looking at between Memorial Day and Labor Day. It's going to be about 4% more crowded overall than compared to last year. The good news is that the airlines are adding more flights, especially on the busiest routes. So it's not like we're all going to be squeezed into smaller spaces and elbow to elbow like it's Christmas time, but it will be a little bit more crowded.
But airfares are low compared to what they have been recently. Why is that?
Well, you've got more competition, especially on the low end from Spirit, and the low-cost carriers, they continue to expand. And as they put pressure on the established airlines to come up with basic fares, you see more people who maybe they're flying United, maybe from Hilton Head, South Carolina to Minneapolis, so they get a basic fare. That's what we're seeing more of, and that's what's keeping the fares under pressure. And overall, you have a strong economy, Sue, so you've got a lot of people who have said, you know what, I'm going to take a trip this summer.
All right. What about the grounding of the 737 MAX planes? How is that going to impact the airlines, the availability of flights? I know you said that they have added some flights, certainly, but what kind of impact, if any, will we see?
A fewer planes for, say, Southwest, American, and United. Those are the ones who have 737 MAXs that have been grounded, but it's not a huge amount. We're talking about a low percentage of their overall fleets. So what's an airline like Southwest going to do? They're going to make sure that they're meeting demand on the busiest routes. Now, does that mean that perhaps they may pare back their service on some of the less popular routes? That's a possibility, and you might see fares go up a little bit there, but we're not talking about a huge spike in prices. And that's how the airlines, especially United, American, and Southwest, they're going to adjust to the situation until they get the MAX back, which they hope might happen by the end of August.
That was going to be my next question, but you anticipated it beautifully, as always. Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, Sue.
Phil LeBeau. Coming up, the quest to build a home that can stare down a hurricane. Here's a look at what to watch for tomorrow. The minutes of the Fed's last meeting will be released, giving investors insight into the central bank's thinking on the direction of interest rates. Amazon hosts its shareholder meeting, which will include voting on proposals related to its use of facial recognition software. President Trump is expected to meet with Democratic leaders to discuss infrastructure, and that's what to watch for on Wednesday. Andrea is the first named storm of the 2019 Atlantic season. It is the 5th year in a row that a system has been named before the season officially begins on June 1st. And as you know, recent storms in the U.S. brought record destruction. That has some looking to fortify their homes against the next storm. Diana Olek is back with us tonight with another installment of her series on the rising risks to real estate.
The destruction from Category 5 Hurricane Michael was breathtaking. But this one image had homeowners and builders alike in awe. One home left relatively unscathed on Florida's Mexico Beach.
Total devastation for miles in every direction.
Russell King built this two-story house a few years ago with hurricane winds not just in mind, but in every aspect of the design. It sits 12 feet above the ground and is anchored 28 feet into the ground.
I felt like it had a better chance of fighting the storm.
Now, 7 months later, King says it is not enough.
The storms are, in my opinion, from what I've seen, getting stronger.
He learned from Michael and is upgrading his home yet again.
All this cross bracing is new. That wasn't there. All that foam was new. That happened last month. All these light fixtures here, they're all going away, every one of them. So we're busting this up to make way to put in something else, probably pavers, where we don't have concrete that will shift against these columns.
King is fortifying the house well beyond any current building codes. His next-door neighbor built to the highest local code 2 years ago, but the home is a total loss. New mandatory building codes adopted after Hurricane Andrew have improved hurricane resistance in Florida's new construction. Nationally, the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety created a hurricane-fortified standard a decade ago, meant as a guideline for builders and owners. But so far, only 8,000 homes have that designation. Those that do sell for 7% more, according to a University of Alabama study.
The technology to fortify homes has advanced dramatically, but the demand for it actually really hasn't. And that may be because homeowners mistakenly believe that it's wildly expensive.
I wouldn't describe it as cost prohibitive. We actually focus on low to moderate income homeowners, and this is built balancing that along with safety.
Lance Rettig is the local executive director with Habitat for Humanity, which has built 81 homes in the Panama City area. Habitat builds beyond the latest hurricane codes and can do that even on the lowest priced homes.
We have this rod here, so then you don't need to theoretically have these other connectors on, but we do. The steel roofs does add an incremental cost that would be about 10% to the home. The rest of the things that I'm talking about is almost negligible, maybe $1,000 on a $75,000 four-bedroom house.
There are levels of protections, just as there are categories of hurricane strength. The latest Habitat homes fared better than their neighbors in Hurricane Michael, but Russell King isn't taking any chances.
We'll spend easily another $100,000.
Do you believe that there's such a thing as a hurricane-proof house?
No. No.
For Nightly Business Report, I'm Diana Olek in Panama City, Florida.
And before we go, here's a look at the final numbers on Wall Street today. The Dow advanced 197 points to 25,877. The Nasdaq was up 83 and the S&P 500 added 24. And that is Nightly Business Report for tonight. I'm Sue Herrera. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening and we'll see you tomorrow.